Good morning.
Hello.
Hello, so I think it's whatever time, 2 o'clock in Helsinki time. I don't know what it is. I think it's
Same here.
so the church time is at 2 o'clock.
Mhm.
I think we'll wait like 1 more minute. I think let's see, we have our presenters are here, or most of them are actually. Yes, so I think we can start. All right, so let's see. So this is the IETF110 meeting somewhere in the world, sometime. And this is the first session of the IETF 110. This IPsec maintenance and IP security maintenance and extensions working group. And if you are in wrong room, you can go now out, like everybody normally goes. This time of noticing, oh, I'm reading email in wrong room. So let's see. So let's start with okay, I skipped over Notewell. So this is the Notewell. I guess everybody has seen this a few times already, and this is the first time you are seeing this time this IETF, but it's the same text, hasn't changed. At least I haven't changed the text in the slides, so if it's wrong, it's still wrong. Okay, so we don't have a blue street. We are taking the minutes, the attendance in the. I think it gets filled in by automatically by the data tracker or something like that. We want to have a note takers. There is already pre-filled stuff in the Etherpad now. It's actually it's com ID now. I mean now, and Michael already said that he would be willing to work as a note taker, but it would be useful to have somebody else also. Any volunteers? So Michael, you are still okay with doing the minutes?
Yes, I'm okay doing it.
All right, good. Okay, so I will try to follow the Jabber also, and I think we already have one of the Jabbers, scribes trying to help if there's something in there. All right. There isn't the Meet Echo link, which you are probably aware of if you are already here. And so let's see, let's go forward. So we have quite a lot of items in the agenda this week, but most of them are very short, just a status update or something like that. So we have a document status, then we have work items, which covers the group key management and the IPTFS stuff, both the base and the young document. And then we have lots of new items or semi-new items, like the configuration for encrypted DNS and new payload format and IETF1 graveyard, SD1 edge discovery and X509 extensions and alternative signature schemes, optional SATS payloads in child extent and multi-SA performance. Any comments on the agenda? If not, I think we will go forward. So first one is the working group status of the drafts. So we published the IPv6, IPv4 codes as an RFC 8983. We have two documents that are now in, I think it actually passed last call now, the IETF2 intermediate, which didn't get any comments during the last call, and then we have an IPTFS which had some comments, and we are going to have some update on IPTFS later. Then we have the young IPTF stuff that was just adopted as a working group document. Then we have GI version 2 that I think is ready for the working group last call, and I think we should be starting. It hasn't been receiving that many reviews, but I think if we start a working group last call, we hopefully get some reviews. And it's an old document. It has been having lots of, and we have a presentation of that also.
Yeah.
Then we
15
have
years old.
IETF2 multiple key exchanges and labeled IPSec and the RFC 8229 bis. Some of those actually, I think the multiple key exchange is also something that is ready for the last call. But all right, so for the labeled IPSec, there's a Paul's. Paul can say a couple of words about this. So go ahead, Paul. I think we can.
Okay, test 1, 2, 3. Everybody can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So just on labeled IPSec, there hasn't really been a change in the draft. We've been doing some implementation with the Linux kernel using the SE Linux security module as the secure label provider. It's been really it's been like non-standardized technology in IETF1 and in the Linux kernel for like over 10 years. And so we're just standardizing this use for IETF2. And so we've done quite some work on it, but most of this work is now happening on the SE Linux specific parts. So I think as a document, it's really just ready for last call. I don't think there's any open issues or any small issues left. The only thing we could talk about, because we had quite some problems with the SE Linux implementation, is that should we add something as an appendix, or I think what might be a better idea is actually do a different document with the SE Linux implementation so that we can document that. But so maybe that should be a separate draft.
All right. So yeah. I think we should be ready for the last call for that, and I think it has been out for a long time, and I haven't received any. I don't remember seeing that many comments in lately. So
I guess we did publish the code last month for IETF2, so there's an implementation out there.
Okay. So does anybody have any comments about or concerns putting this in working group last call? If not, I think we will start a working group last call almost immediately after this meeting. If not, I think we will. I think we will start a working group last call soon.
Tero, after you've got a resolution on that, there was a question from Lou about the previous slide and whether
this one.
There we go. Draft IETF IPSECME IPTFS. He was asking.
Which one?
I guess third item down. I guess.
Oh yeah, that's actually the wrong. Yeah, I cut and pasted it from the previous slides, previous meeting, and then it was still hops. Yeah.
Okay.
I forgot to change that.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So then that's about the labeled IPSec. I think we'll start a working group last go of that. And then we go to the presentations. So we have a group key management using IETF version 2. Valerie, you are up.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. And I can see you good.
So, group key management using IETF2. Next slide, please. First of all, it's just a reminder what it is about and where it is used, and about securing IP multicast. And multicast applications usually have at least one sender and many receivers, and it takes advantage of multicast routing, which delivers packet to multiple recipients, so that all these recipients share one SA. So they share the same key. So this requires some architecture to distribute these shared keys between this recipient. So usually this architecture consists of group controller key server and a single group controller key server, which generates and distributes keys and some group members. And group members first create a unicast IETF2 assay to group controller key server, and after that, group controller key server distribute key material, and then it can rekey using either unicast or multicast. So next, please. So recently, a new application for this protocol appeared. It's a distribution of group keys in IETF110-IPSECME-20210308-1200. So 802.15.9 specifies IETF2 as one of key management protocols for 802.15.4. And the first, as far as I understand, the current standard for 802.15.9 from 2015 left group key distribution out of scope, but the current draft 05 version of this standard, it specifies this IETF2 is used for group key distribution. So it uses GSA inventory key exchange over unicast assay, and it allows to distribute, to provide, to convey group keys to members of 802.15.4 networks. So, and SPI field in GSA payload is used very specially to, and it specifies the type of group key to which is distributed. So it's a new application for this protocol, a new emerging application. So the next, please. So then about the document status. The document has been in development for several years, so for a very long time. And a few implementations of early draft version exist that are incompatible with the current draft. It was adopted, has been adopted by IPSECME working group in 2019. And version 01 from July 2020, it was a major rewrite of the early document, early version. And since then, a new version appeared. It was a minor update. And what I'm worried about is the lack of reviews. Because from our point of view, the draft looks mature, but we are worried that the document hasn't received as many reviews as it should due to its complexity and its very deep integration into the IETF2. So the next, please. So it's an outline of the major rewrite changes, just to let you know what was changed. So compared with the previous version of this draft. First, the policy representation is changed. Before, it was like IETF1 style, mostly using attributes. If you remember IETF1, all the algorithms were specified as attributes, and the set of these attributes specified a policy. Now it's more like IETF2 style, using transforms. And attributes are still used for some variables that are not enumeration, like initial message ID values that can be changed over time. Then that's the convention. The other thing that is followed from the first bullet is the format of GSA and KD payload changed. And group key representation is changed. Before, group key was transferred in clear inside key distribution payload. And now all keys are encrypted inside KD payload, either using SKD draft key or using another group key. The reason, the rationale for this is that now IETF implementation itself doesn't see keys in clear. So the keys, they can be stored somewhere in hardware security module, And even if you hack the diamond, the IKE diamond, you still don't access to the keys because keys are encrypted, even inside IKE messages. I think that it's a major change. Then another change that logical key hierarchy, key distribution algorithm is now integrated into the core GIQ2. Before it was some addition that was optional for implementation. Now the protocol is changed in such a way that all the key management techniques is it is GCKS that implements all the key management techniques. And for group member, it doesn't matter which techniques is used. Either it's logical key hierarchy or just distribution keys without this hierarchy. So I think it's also a major change. Next, please. So the IANA consideration are written. Now it's more an extension of IQ2, so that all registries that are concerned with GIQ2 they are now in core IQ2 IANA page. It is not in separate page. And it's also updating many IQ2 existing registries, like transforms and so on. Many parameters have been renamed to reflect their purpose. A lot of clarifications. For example, our payload calculation, which was very unclear, with multi-cluster key messages, is described in detail. Introduced means to indicate cross-dependency of supported algorithms. Using PPK as GIQ2 is clarified. Using ESN is clarified. Failover in situation if some messages are lost during multi-cluster key is clarified. Example is rewritten using LKH. So the next, please. So what about, in more details about GSA payload? GSA payload contains policy necessary to participate in the group. It's protocol. Protocol can be either data security, AH or ESP. AH is for historical reason, of course, nobody uses it. Or GIQ key, it's a new protocol that is used, that is IQ2, like that is used for multicast key messages. So it contains also traffic selector, transforms, and for algorithm and method used in the policy in attributes for variables like initial message ID. GSA format is now common for GIQ key. It's GIQ2 assays that is used for a key, and for data security multicast assay. It's now common. And the some specific case is JEP payload, that is group policy payload that shares the same format and specifies the policies that doesn't depend on the protocol. The next, please. Key day payload. Day payload contains key material necessary for the policy in the GSA payload. So it is now consists of one or more keys that are and also some security parameters. And each key is individually wrapped in a new structure called the wrapped key. And this each wrapped key is encrypted in this structure using either SKD-derived key or other group key. And LKH capacity is now integrated into the IQ2 in such a way that some key are encrypted with other key in the same message or distributed early to this member, so that it can create a key path, decrypting one key with another back to the leaf key for this member. So it allows to implement LKH. And wrapped key may contain either group key or may contain individual key for this subscriber. And for example, in the registration process with LKH, each group member is provided with its own key. So the next, please. So IDG payload contains an identity of the group that GM want to join. It's the same format as IQ2 ID payload and just different payload tag. The next, please. And we also reuse some Ip2 payloads, sometimes with slightly different semantics. So SAG, it's a SA payload which specifies which transforms are supported with algorithm and transforms are supported by a group member. So that GCKs knows that which policy is applicable for this, can be applied for this group member. It has the same format as Ip2 SA payload, but slightly different semantics, which allow to specify current dependency of algorithm in GIQ2 SA and data security SA. And delete payload is also reused, and it also has slightly different semantics because it allows to specify a zero protocol, which means that delete everything, every SA that you have. And next, please. So we also have new notifications. Invalid group ID, authorization failed, registration failed. Sender, its status notifies that specifies that group member is willing to send data. So a special semantics is used in this case because it must be provided with a separate prefix for counter mode algorithms, so that several sender doesn't have the same counters for counter mode algorithm. And the key is needed is it's a new notifier that added in 0.1 version. It is used with PPK to let GCKs know the GM that it must rekey before some sensitive information is sent over this SA. Because as we know, PPK doesn't provide IKSA security against quantum computers until it is rekeyed. So the next, please. So we also use some Ip2 notification like use transport mode, but it has slightly different semantics because multiple authentication may be included. It specifies that a particular data security SA must be created in transport mode because several SA can be created at the same time if they are interdependent, let's say AH and DSP. Next, please. So it was very quick and probably not very good presentation, but my goal was to attract your attention to this document because it badly needs reviews. And I think that it is, until we have more reviews, I think that it is a bit earlier for the working group last call, because after major rewrite, we received 0 reviews. I'm worried about it. Please review because it is important document, and please comment because it was major changes and we need your opinion. So thank you.
All right, so I would also really like to get some people to actually review this. I'm actually trying to review it myself also soon. I haven't actually been able to do that. Is there anybody else who would be willing to review it, like Paul or somebody else, or Michael, who actually makes some stuff on IPsec and so on?
Yeah, I will review it.
Okay, good. So if you get a couple of reviews, I think then we can actually see if it's ready for the last call or not. And when we get those reviews, we can decide whether we need to do some changes or go to the last call. Some of these are also a little bit outside the scope of our, expertise, like the multicast stuff. So we might actually get more comments on the IETF last call than working group last call. Or might get some comments anyways. Anyway, okay, thank you for that. Then I think we will go next. The next presentation is IPTFS base draft. Christian, are you there? Okay. See. Okay, that's different aspect ratio, so we need to scale down the windows. Okay, go ahead. Are you sending the audio? Yes.
Is the audio? Yeah, okay, it looks like it's working. Okay, hi everybody. This is an update on the IP traffic flow security draft, which entered last call, working group last call, we ran recently. Next slide, please. These are the updates since 109. 109, we actually were working on 03, so we've been through a couple of versions since then. The big news, I guess, is that we cleared the transport area review. That was really good. That was the one I was afraid of. Those can be tough. And then we had some pre-working group last call discussion. Valerie, we talked with Valerie about making the draft a little bit more generic in its naming, since people had sort of identified that they might want to use this outside of IPTFS. And it wasn't required, it maybe makes it a little bit easier or more obvious that you can do that. So we changed the identifiers from IPTFS to AgFrag. Also fixed the overhead numbers. I don't know how I calculated the IPsec overhead, but I got it wrong. So I fixed that and then changed the publish in 05. Part of asking for working last call, Tiro did a nice review, and we published those changes in 06. Next slide. So we did a 3-week working group last call, ended last 2/14, I guess. And we got a bunch of reviews from Tiro. That was sort of pre and post. And then we got a review from Sean Turner, Paul Waters, Valerie, and Michael Richardson. And then we posted an 07 based on all the working group last call mailing list discussions. Next slide, I'll talk about those changes. So we had the notable changes were 2 normative, they were minor. One was sort of clarifying that you shouldn't fragment over multiple essays. I don't know if it was clarifying or just putting it in there. It would have been a bad idea anyway, but it's good to have it be normative. And also, Michael Richardson had pointed out there wasn't enough info on packetization layer MTU discovery, which is the sort of the new recommended way to do PMTUD. I don't know how widely this is actually implemented, but there's always hope, I guess. Anyway, in order to do this, you need a probe packet. We have those, so we in the document we point that out, that you use the congestion control packets as probes. But there's one little detail deep inside PLMTUD where it says that congestion control should not treat losses due to probing. So so think about it. If you're sending like a 10K packet, right, and it gets dropped, it says that the congestion control algorithm shouldn't treat that drop as a loss event. So there needs to be some way to say that the algorithm is running currently, and so I added a p-bit for that. That it's not actually used by AgFrag or IPTFS, but it's just for use by PLMTUD to say it's in the process of doing that. Most of the changes were informative. A lot of editorial cleanup. It looks nicer now. Organizational cleanup, like splitting bits out into subsections. Like as previous mentioned, we changed IPTFS identifiers to AgFrag for on the wire identifiers. We expanded the text on the ordering and packet processing on the receiver. We expanded the text on how extra padding could be used to avoid fragmentation. That and even mentioned that this is sort of nice because if you lose a packet, you only lose that packet. You would lose a fragmented packet. Also added a section of on the summary of receiver actions, with internal references. This came from Michael Richardson because he thought it would be useful because there was, the receiver processing was sort of in 3 different places, the things you had to note as a receiver. So just a section that points at those 3 places. And again, I fixed the overhead for the comparisons in the appendix. Same conclusions, that just missed, some bytes. But it didn't change anything because everything sort of, whether you're using IPDFS or IPsec, it used the same overhead. Right, so next slide. So moving forward, we did complete the working group last call period. I think we've addressed all the reviews and incorporated, most of the changes, not everything, but most of the changes. And yeah, so I'm wondering if it's ready to go to the IE sheet. And I think that's the last slide.
All right, Valerie, you can go. She had a comment.
Okay, I just only want to explain why I think that more generic draft would be better. I think that besides IPTFS, which of course is a primary application for this mode, another very interesting application for this mode is an increasing of performance for short packets, because when you use ESP for encrypting or protecting, for example, war IP traffic, which uses very short packet, about 20 bytes, you have an overhead that is hundreds of percent. And if you can put several of such packets into single payload, which will decrease an overhead of traffic overhead significantly. And I think that it's completely a different application. And if, for example, somebody decided to write a draft that explains how to use this mode for such application, it will refer to this existing IPTFS draft as a description of the mode aggregation and fragmentation. And when implementer opens this draft, it will only see IPTFS, IPTFS, IPTFS. So it will think, oh, it's just improper use of a mode that was designed exclusively for IP traffic flow security. That's why I think that it's more useful to first define a mode itself, aggregation and fragmentation, and then even in the set document, just with renaming and instruction on it, and more accurately choosing words in each section, and then describe that the primary application is IP traffic flow security, but it's not the only application, and the mode is described separately as standalone, as useful by itself. That's my opinion why it is useful.
So I do have a response to that. It's not that. So it isn't just an appendix use case of agfrag, right? I mean, we have congestion control, and the reason we have congestion control, and the reason we had to go through transport area review and all of that is because of congestion control, right? And congestion control has nothing to do with agfrag. It's IPTFS. It's because we're fire hosing, right? We're sending packets at a constant rate. I mean, there's a lot of things in here which are IPTFS, and we did take your suggestions about making it generic, including I think 3 different areas: the abstract, the informative, and even another area where we specifically say you can use this encapsulation elsewhere. But reorganizing this document to be a generic with a use case addendum is not going to help people implement IPTFS, which is the goal. It's the chartered feature that we're trying to do here. And if somebody wants to use it to improve performance, they can write a document, an RFC, a draft that talks about that. I don't think it's going to be hard at all for an implementer. I mean, we're talking about like saying, oh, should I do this? We specifically say you can do it like 3 different places in a document. I don't think reorganizing this helps IPTFS, which is what we're trying to do, and which a lot of the document still is pertaining to, including, like I said, the congestion control section.
Well, I agree that some sections of the document, like congestion control, is very specific for IPTFS. I agree. But a section of describing aggregation and fragmentation for market itself, and the section describing the negotiation of this mode, and the section describing of some general ingress and egress behavior, it's not concerned with IPTFS exclusively. And what I think
those sections are there. We don't call those IPTFS sections.
I understand that.
I think this is a minor organizational thing that will mess up the flow of the document and its stated goal.
But
just for something that might happen someday. I mean, let it happen someday then.
Sorry. But in every paragraph of this section, it is called IPTFS. I would like to. Not in every second, at every set. Just more accurate text. what I think.
Well, we took your changes, right? I took your changes in the first round, and then you came back with another round where you want to reorganize the whole thing to be a different document and a different, title and a different everything.
But it doesn't change bit of the wire. It's just the structure of the document.
And the same thing can be said to your comment. The bits on the wire don't change, right? But you're trying to make like some future work that doesn't even exist yet, maybe be able to be done, and we're trying to get IPTFS done.
I think there's two things that it's actually sometimes it's actually very good to have a separate, like we see with an AUX or intermediate or something like that. It started inside one of the drafts. Then we realized that it's actually going to be useful for other things, and I think actually now we already have some other uses for that. And separating it out as a completely separate, protocol entity is making it easier to understand and also easier to implement, because actually one of the problem with IPTFS is that it has been usually the problem because you have been able to do similar type of things earlier, but usually people have been hesitant to do that because actually the IPTFS parts, actually sending the constant bitrate of things is something that is very difficult to configure and causes all kind of weird things. And I think it's much easier to actually do the other parts of the the aggregation and something. So actually, if you think about somebody only implementing the receiving end of this, because in some cases where you have to have a client, you have to have a server doing both of these. And I think if you have a very clear way to say that, okay, this is the receiving end, they don't need to care about sending packets at a constant rate. They just need to be able to understand what they get from the other end. And then if we have a very clear, that's why one of the reasons I think there was people commenting that we need to have a receiver, section separately, so that somebody can only implement the receiver end because they don't care about the actual.
But we don't allow that. But Tero, you specifically wouldn't. You fought back at me against allowing unidirectional in IKE.
Yeah,
right?
but I mean, it's completely much easier. That's why it's much easier. No, we don't. We allow them to be able to send IPTFS frames in both directions. You don't have to send them in constant rate in both directions.
That's true.
So it's completely valid to make an implementation who receives IPTFS fragments, receives aggregates, separates them out, does everything correctly, but only sends, fragments that don't say constant size fragments.
Yeah,
don't aggregate,
totally.
don't fragment them ever, because he thinks that's too much of work for him.
But nothing in this document makes it hard. That's what I don't understand.
No, I think Valerie's point was that if you actually make it so that we actually make it a little bit more generic, that would be easier to implement in the receiver end. And
it's already got a summary section on the receiver, right? And it's very simple. I think that Valerie is looking to change this document into a generic encapsulation, and I think that's fine if that's what the working group wants to do. If they want to walk away from IPTFS and start working on a generic encapsulation draft.
No, I don't think people want to walk away to IPTFS. I think they want to be able to see that it's written in a way. I don't think it's actually going to be just annex. It's going to be like we have a wire format first, and then we have the how to use that wire format.
And the wire format includes congestion control, which is IPTFS related. I really think this is this is stretching. We're going to reorganize the document. It's not going to be a better document for IPTFS. Instead, it's going to be a document about some future use that hasn't been documented. I mean, that's not the right way to do this, right? I would actually
propose that Valerie, because you have been looking at this, and you would think, would you actually make a proposal of what changes, concrete changes, what text you would want to move and something like that to the list, and then we can see if it's so big that I don't think you actually need to hash down the the actual text, but say that okay, taking paragraph 1 from this and paragraph 2 on here and move it a little bit around. That would be actually give some kind of indication how big change is, because I don't think it's actually going to be that big.
Well, I would actually like to see the text, because we've already seen, it's easy to point and say things move around. What I'm claiming is that the document itself suffers in readability and quality.
Yeah, but,
right?
but
So
I mean, having first, the first round of that. If Valerie sees that it's going to be way too much, he probably just says, "Okay, this is too much work." He skips it, and then we are fine with that. If he says, "Okay, it's going to be 7 paragraphs here, moving that back and forth," then we see that he actually wrote that much of text, and then we can see what the actual text is going to be. Just trying to get concrete steps to go forward.
Yeah.
So Valerie, would you be willing to do that kind of work?
I've already sent this message. I can resend it. It's probably with more concrete proposals.
Well, yeah, it says you use IPTFS everywhere, and you should move all this stuff later. And that's why I said I did say you'd send it already. I don't think that's enough. I think if in working last call we want to change this document so heavily, we should have an example of what that looks like. Okay, because I don't think it reads well.
So channeling kind of semi-Java-scribing what's in the chat in case people have missed that. Ben notes that there's another instance of a specific use case being included in a single document, and that making it awkward when other drafts wanted to use that framework but not the other parts, as Tara noted earlier. Paul's view, a bit late to totally reorganize the document. Mike Richardson disagrees with making it generic unless and until there's a second use case. Paul, there is a second use case. Mike, don't mind Valerie writing a this document or a book explaining stuff, but doesn't want this document held up. So there's a fair amount of to and fro in the chat there.
Let's keep in mind too that it already is easy to read for other use cases. I mean, this is I think this goes too far because it's not confusing to read this document and know how to use it outside of IPTFS. I don't agree with Valerie on that. So
I actually when I was reading it in the beginning, I had very hard time of understanding some of the IPTFS stuff. I haven't read the latest draft. This was the prior stuff I heard. Right. I understand some of it that was actually fixed, but I mean, it wasn't that easy at that point.
Yeah, no, and I mean we did make a bunch of changes that Valerie asked for to make it more generic, yeah, right? Yeah. To point out the things.
Yeah. Okay.
Might have run over, but that's
so. I think. Lou,
oh, we have more people.
I think we have other comments, or do you have anything else, Valerie? I don't think you.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that I thought the characterization of the conversation in Jabber was incorrect. It said that there was going back and forth, but I see 3 comments that say don't wait. I don't see anyone saying wait. So yeah, there was discussion, but we have Paul saying it's late to reorganize. We have Michael saying basically the same thing. I said +1, but I am a contributor on it, so yeah, I'm biased. But
I don't think anybody wants to wait. Wait would mean that we wouldn't do anything until something happens. I think people want to work on the draft and get it out as soon as possible. I don't think actually, changing it to the, this kind of things is actually that many hours of work. So we are not talking about waiting for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something like that. I want this to go out very quickly, but I want also to be best possible document we have. So that's why I was, that's why I was saying that if Valerie can actually work on this quickly, then we can go on forward. If he thinks that he can't do it quickly enough, then we go forward with this one.
I'll try.
Thank you, Lou, and apologies. There were indeed several comments in favour of not delaying this further. There's also a further comment from Mike Richardson. Mike, if you have audio, could you possibly expand that? Because Mike's comment is it's a PS. When the second use case comes along, restructure it for IS.
So it's a proposed standard. I'm not sure if I'm being heard. It's a proposed
yes, you
standard.
Are. Yeah. Proposed standard, not postscript.
Yeah, it's a proposed standard, and the bar for that's already too high. And if a second use case comes along, then someone can write some more documents and can do a BIS, and that will be a much more efficient use of the IETF's time than waiting.
Right.
And I'll give you an example of 81 RFC 8152 there.
Thanks, Mike. And there is a reply from Ben to the effect he thought that 2 of the 8152 BIS documents were not internet standards. Sorry, can't turn off the pedanticism today. It is day one after all.
All right, so my proposal is to wait for, not wait. Valerie working on this to get the concrete proposal. What would be the changes to be done to the draft in I would say end of next week, something like that.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
And then I would actually also, because before we go forward, we need to have other things going on, which we will start simultaneously going on, which will be delaying something work for us anyway. We have some works to do with authors and so on, so we will work on that at the same time simultaneously. So this shouldn't be delaying anything of this going forward. I don't think it's actually going to change any of the Shepherd write-up or anything like that, regardless what we do with this actual text.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so
just one other thing. When people come to the mic and, well, they don't come to the mic, but when they open the mic and talk, please state your name, because later when you watch YouTube recordings, you can't tell who's talking. You don't see who's talking, so please state your name as if we were in a physical meeting.
Thank you. That was good comment. I should have remembered to say that myself. I should have said my name also at some point. So that was Tero Kivinen talking. All right. Anything else on this topic or any other comments? All right.
Yeah, Tero, one technical update. One participant reported that the audio streaming feed wasn't working. So I've opened a ticket for it and I've had a response. They have identified the source of the problem, and it's only affecting IPSECME. Sorry about that. They are working to fix it before the end of this session for us.
The audio stream wasn't secure enough.
Yeah, they should have using IPSec. And the question there is, of course, that hopefully it's still going to be recorded. And I mean, I don't think that many people are using the direct audio stream as long as the meet echo works, and if it's going to be recorded correctly, that's good enough. They can always check it out later. And okay, so any other things about this topic? If not, I think we move forward, which was actually questions and comments, and then we have the management, young adoption and update, new SNMP draft stuff. This is it still Christian or something else? Somebody else? Okay, so all right, good. Go ahead and say just for when I need to go forward with the slides.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. You probably didn't see so in top.
Hi, Don Fedick here, Lab Consulting. So this is the Yang model for IP traffic set flow security. Next slide, please. So we had some updates based on the working group adoption call, and we reorganized the statistics to separate inner and outer stats a bit better. We added a max aggregation time as a control option, and we're built on top of the Yang for I2 NSF, which is a complete IPsec Yang for IKE and IKLS and stuff like that. So because we're built on top of that and we're augmenting it, if they change any names and stuff like that, the test files that we have require updating. So we did that, and the current version is 0.2. We're going to change that to the working group 0.0 version as soon as it's available to do that. Next chart. So this is just a snapshot of the tree for the Ike version. The Ikeless version is very similar. It's just in a slightly different place. Sorry, it's a bit of a eye chart test, but it just shows the organization of the management parameters and the readout of those on the left side, and then the statistics. So there's some generic IPsec statistics at the top, and then the inner packet and outer packet statistics. Next chart. So next steps, track any changes in the base IPsec IPTF specification, make sure that we're up to speed on that. Solicit feedback from the work group. We like comments, anything. We have running code for IPTFS, and we are implementing this Yang as well. So next chart. So along with that, we're also implementing a SNMP version for management objects. So next chart. So we wanted to provide a read-only SNMP MIB for the same objects. So we have requirements. Some operators still require SNMP support, and we tried as much as possible to mechanically derive that from the Yang model. There's not a program to do it, but it's a one-for-one type of mapping, and I just showed an example here of the layer 2 fixed rate, what it looks like in Yang and what it looks like in SNMP. Next chart. So the tool, this SNMI tools, also summarizes the MIB in sort of an organization that looks a lot like the Yang tree. So I thought that was useful, and we've captured that in the document as well as the MIB definitions. And so this just shows the organization. And if you looked at the Yang tree, you would find that there's a pretty high correlation between the two. Next chart. So we'd also like to adopt this as a working group document. And so I think that's basically it. Any comments or questions?
Well, Yoav Nira speaking with no hats, well, maybe the I2NSF chair hat. You mentioned the SDN IPsec flow thing. So that just passed the ISG. It's approved. It's still a revised AD needed, but this should no longer be a moving target. So supposed to be stable from now on.
Thank you.
Mike Richardson has a question in the chat. Will this be IPSECME's first Yang document? And Lou replies, yes. I think to that question.
I think we have seen other Yang documents before. We have never published any. I think we have seen a couple of management, documents coming and going, and usually they just come and people are interested on them. Then people are realizing that they can't really use them that much, and then they go away. But hopefully, this would be the first one that's actually going to be used and published as an RFC.
And Ben has a follow-up clarification about 8152 bis. He says for the 8152 bis situation, 8152 bis struct is an internet standard. 8152 bis algs is informational, and draft IETF cozy countersign is newer functionality and is going for proposed standard, if I recall correctly. Paul Wouters says we reviewed the NSF ones.
Right. So I think that's is there any other comments on this document? And it was just adopted as a working group comment, so I would hope people a working group document. So I would hope people actually review it. And my understanding is that there is also, if there's, so I don't think there's. It's now up to date with the, current IPTFS and the current other documents, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So there shouldn't be anything to requiring it to be updated. There is also, I don't think there's that much hurry with this one than the IPTFS. So I think we actually try to get IPTFS out first and then push this after IPTFS, because I don't think there's any need to keep them in sync or keep them. I think the IPTFS is more important.
Yeah.
We probably want to do, we'll probably ask for a adoption call on the 3rd, the MIB. Everyone loves MIBs.
That's actually true. That's actually one of the. But I have understand that most of the stuff we are now doing with Young, and we are not doing any MIBs anymore. But
it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that people they only need read-only MIBs, but they still require out in the real world they're still using SNMP.
Yeah. Okay. So I can actually start an working group, because I think it goes to the same category than the current
Yeah, and it's basically just
Young, so I put it a note for me that yeah.
Cool.
And I'm really surprised that you don't have a tool to actually make a Young MIB from the Young, because I think you should actually, that would be a better option. You write a tool that actually takes a Young model out and makes a MIB out of that, because I think it should be completely automatic process.
Don actually
comment on that.
Don used one, and it just doesn't. It needs some hand holding. So he actually did use a tool that did the initial work, but then he had to clean it up.
Yeah. Ben.
I was just gonna chime in as well about using an automated tool, because it's sort of easier to have more confidence in the result, especially if there is some change to the Yang module that you then have to try and propagate into the SNMP MIB.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned Don took it out of his presentation, but he did start with an automated tool, so he just had some cleanup to do on it afterwards.
I was actually thinking about if there's some things that are missing from the tool, or something that we should hopefully see that augmented. If there is, I think some of those probably needs to special cases in some of the things, but then we could have just a configuration file, so that this is the configuration files we are using for automatically generate this using these special cases. But anyway, okay, that's not our
hackathon in November.
Yeah,
right?
I was thinking about that. Actually, would be something that's useful to have a hackathon tool, or something like IETF tools. But okay, all right. So if nothing else about this, I think we go to the next presentation, which is Ip2 configuration for encrypted DNS. Valerie.
Hi, Valery Smyslov, LS Plus. So it's a presentation, repeated presentation about Ip2 configuration for encrypted DNS. So the next, please. So the last time it was presented in IETF110-9, and it was discussed in possible adoption of this draft. And the comments raised were that please wait for ADD working group to progress before adoption in IPSECME. And since that, ADD working group has progressed far enough to reconsider adoption of this draft in IPSECME. Because ADD working group adopted insecure discovery mechanisms like DHCP router advertisement and DNS, and so this draft has no conflict with the work in ADD working group. And of course, we will commit to cross-review this document in ADD working group. So the next, please. So from previous version, there were some changes. First, a new attribute was introduced, and EncDNS URI template it is used for transferring override templates for DNS over HTTPS. And it was also done some clarification on authentication of private encrypted DNS servers. So the encrypted DNS server hosted by the VPN provider can get a domain variable certificate from a public CA, but is only accessible to client connected to the VPN. It was a clarification. So the next, please. So it's a format for a new attribute and DNS override template. It consists of several override template data formatted as simple structure, length, and template. Next, please. So for DOH specifics, DOH server may support more than one override template. So if DOH is requested, the initiate includes an empty EncDNS override template attribute in addition to EncDNS IP 4 or IP6 DOH attribute in the configure request. And if the responder includes EncDNS IP4 doc or EncDNS IP6 doc in the response, it must also include EncDNS override template carrying one or more override templates. That's very simple. And this mechanism avoids the need to rely on insecure discovery mechanism like GCP or rotated advertisement and on DNS over port 53, which requires additional RTT, and it is not always secure since DNSSEC is not mandatory. It's described in draft Schwartz SUCB DNS 01. So the next, please. So that's all. And I also think that we can reconsider adoption of this document in IPSECME group.
Yes, Paul.
No audio. Oh. We can't hear you.
Paul, we are not hearing you.
That's very strange.
Now we can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay, very strange. Okay. So I read the document, and I find that it's mixing up provisioning and IKE protocol. Like with IKE protocol, you hand out information from the server, you have a client-server trust relationship, and that's how you authenticate the information. And what this does is like somewhere in between provisioning where you don't hard code the DNS servers in the provisioning profile, you allow them to be specified in IKE, but then all of the authentication of them like is left out of the document, is not mentioned in the security considerations how that works. And it even says scary things like, oh, you might authenticate the TLS server of the the DNS server over web PKI using a public certificate from the internet that the server got previously. And I find that really scary. I would really want to see a way where the IKE server can convey the certificate used to authenticate the DNS server if the DNS server is using a certificate. Because we are IKE, we are the authoritative source of information for these things. And so sourcing that out to somewhere on the world or like let's encrypt seems like a dangerous proposition to make. I also have some minor things, but then I'll bring those to the list. But my big concern is that you really need to be able to have this as a standalone system where you can send a certificate along with the specification of the DO or DOT or servers.
Thank you for your comment, and I think that it can be an improvement to the draft. Of course, the draft is not perfect, and if the working group decides that it is still want to work on it, I think that these changes can be discussed probably to the draft.
Okay, Tommy.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, as a thanks for sharing this, and thanks for the updates. I agree with Paul that it would be nice to see a bit more strong authentication in here. However, I think this is something that we could adopt in the group, and I think it is ready for that. Regarding the relationship to ADD, it essentially seems to be the same as the DNR document in there, which is the DHCP, just kind of taking those exact formats and stuffing them into the IKE attributes. So I think that's fine. You're essentially just saving the round trip of also doing DHCP over the tunnel, and you're going to have more opportunities to have more authenticated information. It may be good to kind of specifically call over to that document and highlight that relationship, that you're going to kind of try to keep those formats aligned, if that's the intention, which I think would make sense. That's all.
Okay. A couple of comments from the chat. Mohammed Bukader responding to Paul's concerns that these are the kind of things that can be worked out when adopted. And then Scott Fleur, again replying to Paul, how you get a certificate is not security important, it's how to verify the cert. And then Mohammed just concurring with Tommy's comment.
Right. Okay, Michael.
Hi. So I had read the document, I think, previous Rev, and I followed a lot of the ADD stuff, and even though it's a lot of noise. I don't feel that ADD has progressed far enough for us to reasonably say, answer any of Paul's questions, for instance. And I think that working group is actively trying to do that problem. So the things that Paul said he felt were scary, yeah, would be completely scary if you were doing them with just this document and no other context whatsoever. So I don't actually think we should adopt this document. I actually think that ADD should adopt this document and we should review it. Because I really think that the question, as was said in chat, about how do you verify these certificates and what do they mean, that's really what ADD is really in some sense trying to solve. And so whatever solution they come up with, this document would need to be in synchronous with. So I would say that, no, we should not adopt it. We should strongly suggest that this should happen in ADD with our review.
Well, I think that the document is one kind of cross-area document that is always difficult to decide which area it must be adopted in. So probably ADD is also a good option for trying to adopt the draft there. But as far as I remember, the last time we tried to present it, well, I think it was in July, to ask for adoption. The ADD said that, well, it's not concerned with ADD, it's specific with IPSECME. It was something like that. So probably we can try again. I don't know.
I think we generally try to avoid having other working groups defining IKE payloads, but I guess if something's really different about this one, I mean, it makes more sense that they'll tell us what the content should be, and then we do the formatting, because documents usually do the formatting. So
I agree on that. I think we want to keep that. We make the payloads and so on, but I think we already have done that. I think the document already has those things specified. Okay, the semantics of what they are meaning is what I think. I don't. Or Paul, do you have any concerns about the actual bits on the wire, or do you actually have only what the semantics of the meaning of these bits?
Just audio now? Great. Okay. Sorry. So actually, I do have some other issues. So, for instance, section 3 is a section about deployment examples and things, and that goes into the same trouble that the entire working group has. Is that people don't even agree on whether the working group should tackle all of that space. I would just remove all of section 3 from the document and just specify the payloads and not any of the politics on where what should be going or what the use cases are. Because you're just relaying these very specific technical concepts from the IKE layer. But the other thing I wanted to clarify is, like, I spent a lot of time with Tommy on the split DNS RFC, because the TLS working group and the Web PKI people were really concerned about the change of trust anchors when you redirect the DNSSEC server to something under your control. And this document is actually doing that. And the phrasing around split DNS is also kind of dangerous. Like, if I set up a split DNS, then can I get Google.com's, DNSSEC trust anchors and do other things? There's a serious security consideration section that should be written there, and it should be reviewed by the Web PKI people again, just like they did for the split DNS RFC. And I think the security considerations right now is just a really bad placeholder.
Right. So Ben.
Yeah. Hi. This is Ben Kaduk. I wanted to reply to Paul, I guess, twice now. So at the beginning, when we were talking about conveying the certificate in IKE versus having a Web PKI certificate for the DOH server, I think that for HTTPS, there's a pretty well-defined semantics for how you authenticate an HTTPS server and what constitutes being an authority for a given URL. So I don't think that we should try to override or respecify that, and the only interesting parts depend on what trust anchors are in the trust store of the client. And maybe if we wanted to do something in this space, we would be talking about conveying the trust anchor that you want to use, or perhaps forcing the specific entity certificate as a way of trusting the leaf directly. And that gets back into the second point that you were making about the security considerations and interacting with the Web PKI and getting the review from that. So I definitely agree. We need to get the security considerations reviewed for the PKI stuff, and if we're changing the usage of the Web PKI as you described.
All right, so I think we have to be going forward on this big soon. One of the things I was thinking about, we do want to review this, and I think we actually want to have people to actually work on this in IPSEC-ME. So and I still think that it actually probably would be either we actually just publish the the raw bits on the wire, and then the ADD defines what they are used for, or we just hand it back to the ADD to add the police stuff, that's what they want or something like that. But I don't think we can actually so I would actually want people to actually review this document anyway and get more comments on it, and then we can actually start thinking about whether it should be adopted here and where it should be actually published, because I think there are actually we can work on this in a working group and then hand it over to the to the ADD working group also. So I'm not sure which one will be best now, and I don't think we actually can solve it now. So my proposal is that people will actually review this and send comments to the list, and let's make it good for our point of view, and then see where we actually going to be publishing it, or and how we're going to work forward. Paul and Michael, you still have some comments on this? Is you in the queue, or are you still leftovers in the queue?
still had a comment that I mostly agreed with Paul, that I thought that the document, if it's going to say go into the policy, then it needs to be an ADD. If you want to rip out on just do protocols, if we really feel strongly that that only the IPSEC-ME working group could possibly publish the bits on the wire, then fine. In which case, the document says too much, but will probably then fail a security review when it doesn't have the rest of the content in it. So I guess your plan is a good one, that we should do more work, but I just think that we're going to get nowhere until ADD actually gives us a document to point at for the rest of it.
I agree on that I don't think we can actually publish this before the ADD decides things, but we can work on it and we can make it so that actually is, as I said, we want to be able to be, check out all the bits that we are putting in Ike version 2. I don't necessarily require them to be published in IPSEC-ME. I want to have us to have a proper review on that, and I want to have that review done. We can do that review before the ADD gets its work done. So we can get the bits proper before the ADD gets their stuff working. All right, so if nothing else, I think we go to the next one, which is Valerie with the new payload format for Ike version 2.
Well, it's me again, Valery Smyslov, LS+, and I want to tell a little bit about a possible new format for Ip2 payload. Next, please. So, what problems do we have with current format? I think there are at least two things that make it not very good for some application. First, it contains a lot of redundancy, and many payloads contains a lot of zeros, and length always occupies 2 octets, but while most payloads are short, and most parameters occupy 2 bytes, and we actually allocate less than 256 values and a lot of reserved fields. So this is just an example from Wireshark. So of a say payload. Payload size is 48 bytes, and 24 of them, exactly 50%, are zeros. Next, please. So the other problem is that payload length occupies exactly 2 bytes. So payload size is limited to 64 kilobytes. And there's no problem with message itself, because in IETF there are 4 bytes for length, it's up to 4 gigabytes, but each individual payload cannot exceed 64 kilobytes in length. So next, please. So what do we have with all this? If we make payload smaller, then it would decrease power and network bandwidth for IoT devices, which is very precious for them. And it would also decrease chances of fragmentation in the initial exchange, which is also very important, because fragmentation doesn't work in the initial exchange. Next, please. And if we lift 64 kilobyte size limit, this would allow using post-quantum algorithms with long public keys that some people want to use. It also would allow transfers large chunks of data, for example, in configuration payload. So the next, please. What requirement can a new format, or must a new format have? So it must be suitable both for small and large payloads. And it must be applicable for any payload type, including not yet defined. And encoder parser must remain simple enough to consume low resources. At the same time, some payloads may have special formats. If it is justified, it is if it is a lot of compact, reducing its size can be achieved if you have special formats, not the generic one. So the next, please. So this is just a hope proposal. I don't have draft. It's just some thoughts to gauge an interest in the working group in this work. So, for example, generic payload.
Maybe you seem to have lost Valerie.
Yep, I think so.
Okay, I think he is still a participant. I don't know if what happened to him. Oh, now it's coming back.
Somehow I was. It was some strange. I was kicked off from the from the microphone.
They were talking. They've noticed you were talking too much. Go on.
Well, okay. So just repeat. This is a proposal, ad hoc proposal. I don't have a draft. It's just some thoughts. So it is possible to have three possible formats for generic payload header. For small payloads with up to 64 bytes in length. For medium-sized payload up to 8 kilobytes, sorry, and for large payloads up to 512 megabytes. I think we may should or even should get rid of all reserved fields because we never use them. We can revise existing payload header to reduce their size, also remove unnecessary fields when they duplicate each other, and we can define special formats for some payloads. To my mind, it comes an SA payload and an empty status notified. It is very, very often used. Next, please. This is just a hoc proposal for new generic payload header. So we can leave a critical bit and use the next 2 bits to indicate the length of payload of the field payload length. So in this format, the payload length field can have a length of either 6 bits, 13 bits, or 29 bits for large payloads, depending on the previous bits. Next, please. We can revise an existing payload headers. For example, for key exchange, identification, authentication, configuration payload, we can remove reserved fields. For notify payload, we can remove SPI size because it depends on protocol ID. It can be deducted from it. For delete, we can remove SPI size either, and we can remove number of SPI field because it can be deducted from payload length. For traffic selector, we can remove reserved field and remove number of TS because it can also be deducted from payload length. Next, please. So we can define a special format for 2 payloads. It's inspired by my draft that is rather old, and I was presented it long ago. So for a say payload, we can define a special format that can reduce its size very significantly. And we can also define a special format for notify payload with that contains an empty no data, so empty notify payloads with status type notification. It can be also decreased in size very, very significantly. So next, please. This is an example of a say payload format that can have a special format. If the current say payload in this example has a length of 48 bytes, a special format only 11 lanes in bytes. It's with exactly the same semantics. And next, please. Next, please. And for notify payload, we can reduce it to 2 bytes. Empty notify payloads from 8 bytes to 2 bytes with the first 258 status notifications. Because this payload is used very often in Ip2 to negotiate different kind of things. It will also significantly decrease the size of the message. So the next, please. How this can be negotiated? I think there are 3 options. First, we can define new major IC version. I don't think where it is good or bad, but it will allow to negotiate a new formats because the old responders would return invalid major version. We can define new type of initial exchange. For example, old IKSA init. And of course, all responders will return invalid syntax that will allow the initiator to either reinitiate with the old format or stop talking with this responder. Or either we can define a new critical payload in the IKSA init, followed by payloads in new format. So since payloads are parsed one by one, and once a responder encounters a critical payload that it doesn't understand, it will return and support a critical payload. And it doesn't mean, it doesn't matter if it can't pass the rest of the message. So there are three options at least. So the next, please. So discussion. We don't need to assign new payload types, except for special format assay. We can reuse the existing payload types if it is clear in the context that the new format must apply. For example, if PIKE version is changed. Or we can define new payload types that will exactly for existing payloads that will just duplicate it. For large payloads, transport issues are out of scope of new format. And it is assumed that ICO TCP will be used in combination with ICO fragmentation because ICO TCP has a limitation itself on the size of message of each individual message that is 64 kilobytes. So ICO fragmentation must be used in this case. What about certificates? Certificates consume a lot of space, but they can be compressed. There are at least two proposals I'm known of. One of from TLS world is just use generic purpose compression algorithm, or there is more radical proposal in draft medicine COSI CBOR CERT that compress that redefines X509 certificates in CBOR. The next, please. So comments. This is just, as I said, I don't have draft yet, and I just want to gauge if there is any interest in this work in the working group.
All right, so any comments on, I guess Michael is the first in the queue. So Michael, your comments?
Hi, Michael Richardson. So if you're doing this for constrained devices, then you should be implementing this in CBOR. CBOR already has variable length integers, including down to 1 byte, including the code. So that would be much better way. And we could walk through the IETF spec and we could translate it to CDL, express it as CBOR. And I would say that probably will get a much better compression there and a much higher code reuse. And if you're going to compress certificates with that document, then you need the CBOR anyway. So there you go. If you're doing this so that you can have larger than 64K content then I think that is encoding in CBOR is not a terrible thing, but it may not be the most easy to do as your slide on IPv3, etc. There. At this point, the IoT space is not using IPsec at all, despite what some people think. And I would really want to see some real non-research applications of it before I thought this working group should spend the time on it. Having said that, I really think IoT space should be using IPsec, but it's not. So I don't think it's worth pursuing at this point.
Well, thank you. I was thinking about CBOR as one of approaches, but to be frank, I'm not an expert in CBOR. And as far as I understand, it requires allocation of tags from some registry, from CBOR controlled registry. Does it? So, can you please clarify?
Wait, this is Tero giving us, not a chair, but I think my comments on this is that I think there's two issues here, and I think we should keep them separate. One is do we actually want to raise this payload size limit from 64 kilobytes to larger? Because that's not something that they are going to be used in IoT environments in compressed formats. If you are going to be sending 64 kilobyte stuff, you are not concerned about a couple of bits in the header.
Sure.
So I think that should be a separate issue, and I think we should probably leave it out in this discussion and add it, because we are talking about more or less. Actually, if you are working on the completely new payload format, then yes, we want to think about that. But if you think about compressing the current one, like talk about CBOR, I don't think we actually need to talk about that and there. I was thinking about more or less that what most of these things that you're actually doing are this kind of static header compression stuff. So we could actually, one of the way of looking at this would be also to work on this kind of, we have an IC version 2 bucket that has stuff there, then we compress it down to something that is we see that okay, it's a payload notify, there's a non-critical bits, and then there's the length here. We just compress it down to see that okay, it's short enough. We put one bit in the received with one saying that okay, this is compressed payload, we have a rest 6 bits as a length, and then we have a compressed notify payload. And when we can actually create first a normal notify payload and then compress it down to this representation, then authenticate and encrypt it, send it to the other end, can expand it. The good thing is that we can actually still use the original payloads. If we happen to have, suddenly have something that we can't compress because somebody actually used some of the research fields. So this would actually be the same kind of thing that converting to CBOR. We could actually have IC version 2 payload, encode that as a CBOR and send it out. We only encode those things that in CBOR that are actually usable in normal case, and then special case it wouldn't remove the old IC version 2 code, but I think still we need that most likely for backwards compatibility anyway. But I think this is something that would be interesting to work on, and at least yeah. Okay, so there's a couple of comments in chat.
Yeah, Scott disagrees with you.
Yeah, I know. And we are running out of time very soon, so we probably let's see that Scott is saying, I disagree with Tero. If we are opening up the hood by tweaking payload format, it makes sense to address different requirements, constraint devices and 64 kilobit payloads.
So yeah. I just want to answer Tara. What you described, this approach was used in draft Smyslov IETF IETF compact. It was just a generic encoder, decoder, pre-encoder, and pre-decoder and post-encoder that just converts existing IETF payload format into compact form and vice versa. And it's a good approach, but unfortunately it can be used if you want to leave the 64 kilobytes limit, because for this thing you must redefine, because you don't have an existing payload that exists. Well, anyway, we have a draft beyond 64 kilobytes that just suggests another approach when a sequence of payloads with a size less or equal than 64 kilobytes is used as a single data unit for this type of payloads, and its size can be greater than 64 kilobytes in this case. But at the last IETF, you have suggested that probably instead of this approach, it is definitely a protocol hack, some hack. So we can redefine a new payload format. That's why this presentation appears. So I'm trying to gauge whether it is interesting, or we can return to that proposal, because it is still valid to send the sequence of payloads.
All right, thank you.
As single one.
That's actually as a procedural thing, I would say that if you are defining IC version 3, I don't think that's a minor extension or maintenance of IC version 2. I think we probably would require at least a rechartering, perhaps even a new working group for that. If we are doing compression of existing payload stuff and things like that, then we can do it here. If we are reusing the existing IC version 2 payload to having multiple payloads in one message, that's also belongs here. So, okay. But I think we are running out of the time very soon, so we actually need to go forward. I think it would be interesting to get some discussion on the list about this.
Yes, please.
All right, so the next one is Paul. moving to the graveyard. We are not hearing you. Unmute yourself. Now we can hear something, I think.
Strange. The video
Yes,
audio
now we can hear you.
Okay, so next slide. So this slide has been sort of drifting in between what to do and fallen in administrative cracks. Basically, I've just bumped the document to prevent it from dying. And I just wanted to reiterate that the only thing this document does is create, and I think it's the most important thing, create IANA status columns for all the IANA registries so that we can add things like deprecated there with a link to the RFC. And then formally closes, IETF1 registries, remind people IETF1 is historic, and tells implementers to stop implementing IETF1. I think even if we decide not to do this because people go like, well, we're not the internet police, and if people want to use IETF1, then go ahead. We still need a document to, I think, add the IANA column for deprecated to some of these things. So if we're having that document, we might as well nudge them a little bit further from not using IETF1. So I've now bumped this twice, so I think you should really move on. I don't think there's a next page, is there? There is. Oh yeah, this is just shaming Taro into the process. So nothing has happened. We should just either adopt this or kill it. But then if you kill it, I'm going to come back with the status column for IANA draft document.
Right. Dan.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. My name is Dan Harkins. So I actually support adopting this, but I think we should do some changes. So Paul, thanks for doing this, first of all. Similar to what TLS is doing, deprecating TLS 1.0, I think that this should be a BCP, not a standards track. And also, it went from die to graveyard, but I don't think we need these cutesy names. I think just make it IETF1 to historic should be fine. I think section 3 can be cleaned up. There's a lot of subjective opinion in there, like a high chance of this, or quite often this, or most likely that. And I think all you need to say is that anything that IETF1 could do, IETF2 could do better. And the only reason that anybody wanted to do IETF1 was labeled IPSec and post-quantum, and both of those reasons go away with the advancement of these other drafts. Regarding deprecating all of these registries, I'm not really sure whether that's necessary. If you note that there hasn't been any work on IETF1 for over a decade, and I'm not really, and if this does go to historic, I'm not really sure what sort of subterfuge could happen by not, without deprecating these registries. But the reason I'm cautioning on this is because other organizations are using at least one part of the IETF1 registry, and I think before we just go deprecate everything, I think it should be we really need a good reason why. My final comment is, you mentioned that one of the reasons not to use IETF1 is because it uses, quote, very weak groups 2 and 5, but then you don't go and deprecate them. All you're deprecating is 1 and 22. So is the reason why you don't want to deprecate these very weak groups as well?
So the reason they're not deprecated here is that we have another cycle of documents for that. So we've got like RFC 8223 and 8247 that are specifically about ESP and IKE algorithms and deprecating those. So this document only talks about the things that are not talked about in those documents. And there's a lot of May algorithms that people just never bother to deprecate that this document sort of tried to pick up and just deprecate as well.
This is Tero Kivinen. I'm talking now as an IANA expert for IKE version 2 registries. and there was this discussion about adding these status column to the IANA registry. I'm not against having status column that only has a deprecated and not deprecated status. I'm against if we actually want to have. There have been people saying that we should have a should, must, and that should be that kind of information in the IANA registry, and I don't think we don't want to do that. Adding this status column that has deprecated is okay for me. The IETF1 registries are already closed in a way that you can't actually allocate anything that, and if you do, I think the IANA should be complaining about that anyway. The only thing that is actually, I think we are just moving the. Actually, I think we have already decided that they are closed in that way. So I don't think
but that is. But Tara, that's a very informal thing of the IANA registry expert, aka you.
No. I'm not. IETF1 registries are IESG. They are standard document required to update them. They are not expert review.
Okay.
But I think that there is already decision not to add anything there, and moving them close it doesn't change anything. They stay there. External documents can still refer to them. It doesn't change anything from them point of view because they still can't be doing any updates to them, and they haven't been able to do any updates to them anyway since the last time .11 forced us to update things there, even if would it have been needed. But anyway, so I think that's my comments for this. I think Ben is next.
Yeah, so I had a few things that I wanted to reply to that Dan had said. So Dan suggested that this could be a BCP document the way that the TLS old versions deprecate was. But that was actually pretty controversial to do that as BCP. And there were a couple of folks during the IETF last call that suggested it would have been better as a RFC 2026 applicability statement, and that it was okay to do the TLS thing as a BCP just this one time, but in the future we should be mindful and do it differently. So it's not really clear to me that we want to switch to doing this as a BCP versus a different way. Dan had also mentioned that we could move the old documents to historic, if I understood correctly. There's something about historic. And we do have a dedicated mechanism for changing the status of documents, including moving them to historic, which does not necessarily involve an RFC to do that. There's a separate class of status change document, and there's a ISG statement about it that I will put in the chat after I stop talking.
Yeah, that's why the language was actually updated, I think 2 versions ago, to basically just remind them that it's historic, and then basically, we would start that process of making them historic, because you're right, that's not
do that in parallel.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the other point Dan made was about the IETF version 1 registries that are in use by other organizations. And I have in my local notes that the IEEE is using them, and I have a to-do item to have us send a liaison statement to the IEEE before we actually make any new actions in terms of closing off or deprecating those registries, just to make sure that everyone is aware and has a plan.
Okay, so I think
the Wi-Fi Alliance is also using it, and RFC 5931 uses it.
Thanks. I will add that to my notes.
All right. So I think we are still. I think the adopting this document is still okay. So I think we should adopt this document as a working group item and then start working on it, or actually finish working on it. I don't think that actually requires that much work, but except Dan has some comments. So if you actually adopt it as a working group document, then we can work on it, and I would actually like to publish it out. And if anybody has any comments or disagreements of adopting this or starting the adoption call, please say now something, or send to the list. But I will start an adoption call for this after this IETF. Okay, so let's move to the forward. The next one is PGP update for SD1 Edge Discovery. Linda or whoever is going to be presenting that.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. Okay, so we have this draft in IDR for the SD-WAN edge discovery. What it is SD-WAN is basically adding additional bandwidth to the existing MPLS VPN network. So the provisioning is slightly different from the IPSec. So the reason for us to come to here to IPSec ME group is to get the feedback on what we are doing and see if there's any problem with that. And because our next step is for working group last call. Okay, next page, please. Okay, so here just some typical comparison with traditional IPsec configuration. So for the BGP controlled SD-WAN, so we have the MPLS VPN already existing, and we're adding additional IPsec tunnels between the two edge nodes to increase the bandwidth. The differences to the traditional IPsec is those CPEs are already connected to the controller, which is the route reflector, RR in this diagram, through a secure channel. So the authentication is already done because they have to control other configuration for the CPE2 and CPE1. So, and also for the like we call in IPsec, we call traffic selector. We have in BGP, we have route target. With route target, you can import a particular VRF or export VRF, and so that your routes can be allowed to talk or not allowed to talk. And all those policies are implemented through the client VRF. And so with this, you can scale better with large number of nodes. So this is just compare with the traditional IPsec. Next page, please. So here we put a table here. I want to get your feedback. The highlight yellow means the BGP controlled SD-WAN for the IPsec parameter exchange can be optimized in the BGP controlled SD-WAN environment. The gray part is the same as IPsec traditional configuration, especially for the authenticated peers. The controller actually has the total saying, a total control on which node can this particular node can communicate with, and the communication is already authenticated. And for the remote peer address configuration, that is also controlled by the route reflector. The policy is in the controller, not on the node themselves. The gray part, the IKv2 proposal, the transform set, those are the same. Even with BGP, we have to exchange them through the messaging. For the client discovery, the prefix discovery, like when you have multiple client prefix attached to the edge node, in the IPsec, you run routing protocol in each of the tunnels. In BGP update, BGP update itself will update, advertise the client attached to the particular node, and also associate tunnels. So here, the last one is the access list or traffic control, traffic selector is achieved by the BGP route target, import and export route target. Next page, please. Okay, so here's just explanation on how this client traffic are exchanged. So in BGP, we have those recursive update. We advertise the BGP advertise the client routes, like for example 10.1/3024, and the next hop is the node, which is CPE2, and then it can have the extended community to indicate this is a hybrid tunnel, which include MPLS tunnel and the IPsec tunnel, and we use color to coordinate with the update 2. So update 2 is more about infrastructure information. So that this will describe in detail of the like IPsec parameters or the VPN MPLS parameters, and also indicate for specific IPsec like inner encapsulation, whether it's GRE or other form of inner encapsulation. So with this, the client update is separated from the IPsec itself, make it more flexible and make it scale better. Next page, please. So for the BGP update, you can include the IPsec attributes, or you can have a pre-established security association with the identifier. So for the underlay tunnel advertisement, we can include the IPsec SA identifier together with the inner encapsulation. Next page, please. And you can also give the specific IPsec sub-TLVs, which indicate all the key information, the nonce, the transform set. Next page. So I sent an email to the IPsec ME a few weeks ago asking for feedback. I got some people coming back with questions. So I just want to take this opportunity to get feedback, see if there's any major flaw we're doing in BGP. And if not, that would be great. Then we'll go for working group adoption in IDR. Any questions?
All right. So I don't see any questions. Running out of time. So the three sessions are only a couple of minutes each. So try to be very fast. Okay. Next one. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, this is Leonie Bruckert from ZQNet. I'd like to raise the topic of alternative signatures in IETF2. Next slide, please. So the ISO X509 standard defines 3 extensions: subject alt public key info, alt signature algorithm, and alt signature value. They allow for introduction of an alternative algorithm into certificates. And they, if this extension is present and the application are upgraded, the alternative algorithm is used instead of the native fields. So if you think of post-quantum cryptography, so you choose a post-quantum signature scheme as an alternative algorithm, then this would mean that only the post-quantum signature will be verified. So POC is not fully trusted at the moment. Standardization will take some time. So it may be a good idea to use a hybrid mode. So yeah, of course, this alternative extension allows for a smooth migration from one algorithm to another and is not limited to post-quantum cryptography. But yeah, in case you want to use post-quantum cryptography early, it may be a good idea to use yeah, a hybrid solution, such as it's done with the hybrid key exchange. Yeah, so the first question to the working group is, has anyone already thought about how this alternative signature extension can be integrated in IKE? And the second question is, yeah, I know some people that would prefer a hybrid solution. So I'd like to hear your feedback. Do you think that we need a hybrid solution for signatures?
All right. So I think we are now so much out of time that I don't think we actually going to get the comments on here. I think we want to discuss this in LAMPS or some other working group, because I don't think it's actually related to, we actually just use the certificates as X509 gives them to us, or PKIX or whatever.
Yes,
Ben, do you have some comments?
Becky, jumping in as the area director, there's been some discussion already in the LAMPS working group about post-quantum crypto and the potential for doing hybrid and what the hybrid would actually look like. So I think that may be best to try and consolidate the IETF discussions of that in LAMPS, and that would also give it the opportunity to sort of align what we do for X509 and PKIX in general in the IETF, because I think, as you note, there is some stuff in the ISO X509 that's not really in the RFC 5280 that we tend to use in the IETF. So that would be my suggestion, is to talk about it in LAMPS.
All right, so there is a couple of comments in the Jabber about this, but I think we'll skip them now and go to the next presentation, which is Paul. You get 5 minutes for your 2 5-minute sessions. So try to compress them in 2.5 minutes each.
Okay, test. Okay. So there was a draft a couple of years ago about simplifying the rekey process by leaving out all the things that we don't need because they're staying the same anyway. So this draft originally didn't see much adoption because there was some IPR confusion. That has been resolved now, so there's no problems with IPR, and I think it's a good draft to have. It will also, Valerie will be happy to know, greatly reduce the number of bytes sent during rekey, because you're basically skipping the entire SA payload, all the algorithm negotiation parts. They're all, you don't send them, you just send a new notify saying, same as before, here's the new SPI, or here's the old SPI, continue. So next page. So the way they do it is they send a new notify, minimal rekey supported, and then during the rekey you can omit the SA and or TS payloads and then send a unchanged message with the SPI. And everything else is the same as before. And then next slide. And the changes I think that are still needed for this document. It says that you could change your algorithms, which I don't think is allowed, so I don't think we should have that text. There's some text that said what to deal with if your ACLs change to sort of fall back to the old system, but I think that should be simplified by, well, if your configuration changed and you reload it from disk, you should just delete all your essays and start from scratch like we normally do. And I think for the SATS unchanged payloads is where you basically do a child rekey. I think we also need to send the old SPI, which it currently doesn't do, because if we have multiple traffic selectors, multiple child essays with the exact same traffic selectors, we really want to tell them which one we are replacing with this rekey, and otherwise we don't know, because normally that SPI is present in the SA payload, but we're not sending that now. And I think we should clarify a bit more the BFS and the KE payload. So that's an overview in a shell. Please read the draft, think about the idea, and discuss this on the list. And then the very last quick overview, we've done some more work on the multiple SA performance issue draft. So we have new code, so we've updated code, so please pull it down if you want to look at it. So again, it's for installing multiple IPsec assays, one per CPU or one per quality of service. There's 2 notify payloads for that, the QInfo one and the numQ one. One tells you how many you want, and the other tells you a bit information about each one of them, so you can distinguish them. Next slide. So this is the performance increase we see, like it basically linearly scales with the CPUs, just a reminder. So next slide. So the changes we made, the numQs now only has 1 value. We found that negotiating minimum maximum leads to too many corner cases where things get confusing. So we just take one number, the preferred number, and people can take the largest of the 2 if it's not insane and outside of their DDoS protection things. We also added a signaling possibility for the CPU identifier. Initially we didn't have them, but our experience has shown that if you start rekeying things, it's really useful to know which one goes where, or where it relates to, so that you can better match them. And we did a bunch of readability improvements, some language changing. So again, we would like people to read it and give us feedback and run our code, and then maybe we will all get consensus. And that's it. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's basically it. Like actually, one thing. If you go one slide back, sorry, there's one important thing I want to mention. The problem is that the RSS on network cards for ESP is rarely supported, and so we're kind of stuck with, if we want to do this properly, we would really need to use encapsulation, like UDP encapsulation usually. The problem is if we have multiple one of them, currently the protocol maps this all to a single port, and we really would like some way where we can map them onto different ports so that they can actually use the RSS mechanism of the NIC cards. It's currently not possible in IKE, and so we would really like some more people thinking about this problem.
All right. So I would propose that next time you put the draft name, put it in so that there's an IPSEC-ME in the name, so it actually shows up in the automatic listing of the draft. Because now it has this p-voters multi-essay performance, which doesn't show up in the list. So, but yes, people would. I would hope people would actually review this document, and you can probably send a reminder to the list and ask for reviews and so on. But I think that's actually, we are running out of time now. This was the final thing, and I don't think we have time for an open discussion anymore because we used most of that during the earlier times. So, and we know we don't allow any puppies. So I think that's it, unless somebody has some really important things before we close up. Okay, I don't hear anything, so I hope we are going to be seeing people interacting in the list and try to get things going forward. In my to-do list, I have a starting working group last call for labeled IKE version 2, do some reviews on IKE version 2, make a working group adoption call for MIP document and graveyard document, and I think that's what I'm planning to do after this meeting closes. So, Valerie, you have still something?
I just want to remind that multiple key is also very.
Oh, multiple key exists. Yes, good. I will put that one on the list.
It's very good.
Yeah. All right, good. Thank you. Okay, so we will see in next IETF or in GatherTown or somewhere else.
In SAG. Everybody's going to come to SAG.
Yeah, everybody comes to SAG anyway.
Right. Okay, thank you all.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.